Welcome everyone to today's webinar. If we haven't met before, my name is Layla and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network. We are very excited to be presenting the 7th and second last webinar in our 8-part empowerment series called CCSN's Remarkable Cancer Survivor's Guide to Nurturing a Spiritual Perspective. I'm pleased to welcome back our host for the series, Dr. Rob Rutledge. He is a radiation oncologist based in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and he specializes in breast, prostate, and pediatric cancers. He's also an associate professor in the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie University. Our guest presenter for today is Reverend David Maginley. He is an interfaith spiritual counselor at the QE2 Health Sciences Center in Halifax, and he is an award-winning author of Beyond Surviving: Cancer and Your Spiritual Journey. He is featured in the documentaries Here, Right Now, and When You Die. David has also survived cancer 4 times, which resulted in a profound near-death experience and explorations in the connection of body, mind, and spirit. He knows cancer from both sides of the hospital bed and this life from both sides of the veil. In today's webinar, our speakers will offer ways of tapping into the most mysterious and healing parts of our humanness. They will discuss near-death and end-of-life experiences and other aspects of positive spirituality. This presentation will be inclusive of people from all spiritual orientations, including those who are atheists. At the end of the presentation, our speakers will answer your questions. However, at any time during the webinar, please feel free to type questions into the chat box. For those of you who have not attended an earlier webinar, the Canadian Cancer Survivor Network is an organization working with cancer patients and survivors to learn about health system complexities, connect with others to plan action, and act to promote best care and healthier survivorship. If you'd like to learn more about CCSN, please visit our website at survivornet.ca. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available tomorrow on YouTube. In addition, the slides will be available on SlideShare. Links to both will be sent to the email you provided. Now I'll turn things over to our presenters. Welcome.
Thank you, Layla. I am like a kid before Christmas, maybe is the best explanation here. I just love this topic. I love the idea that people can really empower themselves and really make a huge difference in terms of their health and happiness and their connection. And so this is a key element to this entire series. And I'm super excited to present alongside our wonderful Reverend David Maginley. We call in Dave when it's really tough, when people are really struggling, and Dave's such a master at kind of connecting and teaching and empowering people as well. And I think you guys are going to have a fantastic experience hearing from the guy who's come there and back. All right. Big perspective here. And I'm just going to minimize my screen up top there. So first of all, we want to be very, very respectful of everyone's belief. We're not trying to proselytize or change people's perspective. If you're attending, a traditional community and that's very helpful for you, we totally endorse that side of things. So we're simply offering a perspective that we believe is helpful. And we're hoping that the talk will really be very relevant to your life, right? And what you can do to engage in this world, let your spirit express itself. So diverse traditions, including those who are agnostic or spiritual, but not religious. And it's very difficult to define spirituality. I'm taking a very, very broad brush at this. I happen to like this definition. It's the feelings, thoughts, experiences, and behaviors that arise for a search for the sacred. And I like this definition because it sounds active. It sounds like a verb to search, to be part of, that arise from that search. And we're taking this in the context of the remarkable cancer survivors, which is a really fun kind of idea as well. So take home points, and there'll be many more than this, I suspect, is that I encourage people not to separate their spirituality from their day-to-day activities. I often think, people have this kind of connection, this kind of broader view, and then as soon as they come into the cancer center, it gets shrunk into this, got to get the best treatment, which is super important by itself, but it kind of gets shrunk in. And I've had that experience when I've asked that question, are you comfortable talking about your spirituality or religion? And suddenly it's like, oh, right. I remember, yeah, I can come home to something that's bigger than myself, and I can bring that sense of peace, that sense of love, that sense of connection into everything I do, including how I interact with the medical system. And that doesn't mean you don't have to advocate for yourself. It means that you can bring that kind of sense of love and peace while you're doing all the things that we're recommending. We nurture this aspect of ourselves through compassion, gratitude, curiosity, sense of purpose, in sourcing that strength from within. One of Dave's key teachings is that we're talking about an intrinsic spirituality. You're talking about something that's within you. You're connected to it quite inherently, and not something that's outside of ourselves. Dave, do you want to have a quick comment on that idea just to get things going?
Yeah, it really is about that inner sense of my identity, who and what I am is connected and flows from something much greater. I'm not acted upon by an external God, though that is the dominant model, right? My consciousness is the real estate I share with the divine, with the mystery, with the sacred. So it's really an inner identity and world, and that turns out to be the biggest universe there is.
Wow, beautiful. Yeah, and it's also empowering to think that we're part of this and we can kind of facilitate that connection. And ultimately, we're trying to encourage people to be real, to be authentic, and then to be able to integrate all the aspects of their character, including their spiritual aspect, in the sense of wholeness. And that's the kind of goal. And this to me is the paradox. When you do that, when you're able to accept and connect and make congruent all aspects of yourself, to me, that's the ground of the miracle. And that's where the physical changes can happen. So remember, big picture, why did we create this series? And you could be tapping into this in any way. It could be one or many of the above. So we maximize our chance of recovery by taking care of ourselves in multiple aspects. And I think when you do tap into the kind of sense of something bigger, it actually primes something that's physical. So the metaphysical, the beyond, helps the physical healing. Yes, we can feel better emotionally when we come home to our true identity. We want to think more clearly, function better. So again, this is the kind of the physical aspect of this. Connecting more deeply. When we do those things, we can resonate more with the divine within ourselves. And ultimately, you may see this goal as psychological growth, or maybe even letting go of what's restricting you or the blockages, and that you can grow spiritually as well. And that, I think, can facilitate the truest healing, the deepest healings. I'm also trying to endorse this within a bigger picture because we can't talk about everything every week. And so the idea is getting the best care from the medical system, right? Again, bringing your spirituality into that. The empowerment piece, I'm not going to talk about very much, because I guess one of the things I will say, though, is that I've been trying to reinforce this idea is to not separate the kind of sacredness of your life, just compartmentalize to just, when you meditate or when you pray or when you practice some kind of, spiritual activity, that we bring that same sense of sacredness right into our lives. And specifically recognizing that the body is the sacred vehicle. It is the mechanism. It is the medium in which you're able to connect with the world, to express your spirit, to connect with other people. And when we see the body then as sacred, then we want to take care of it. It's the instrument that allows us to attune to something bigger, which is also kind of part of spirituality, that it integrates both body, emotions, thoughts, relationships, and something bigger. It's all one together. So we take care of our bodies through exercise, diet, etc., relaxation techniques. Obviously, when we settle our minds, because this is actually probably the biggest work for us, is that the mind can get us trapped into worrying and ruminating and, really kind of sticking our focus and attention in a very narrow kind of fear-based perspective. And so if we can settle our mind, then we can become aware of something that's bigger that is our own spirituality. So, and lastly, obviously, today we're actually talking about point number 5, which is how to nurture your spiritual life, or some ideas that can help manifest that for you. Okay. So I'm starting back with Bernie Siegel, who, because I'll give you a little bit of my own story then, because I would have called myself an atheist in high school, but I think God had a plan. I mean, quickly began to understand that. I went to Trinity College at University of Toronto, Anglican College, began to chat with the seminary students there. So, starting to expand, and then I went to medical school, and it was still a sense of dryness, still a sense of being in a desert. And then the book came off the shelf, and it was called Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel. And that I knew was going to change my life as soon as I started reading this. And Bernie was an Ivy League cancer surgeon. He began to notice that some of his patients did exceptionally well. The ones whose tumor shrunk away much faster than expected, who got through tremendously difficult treatments, who far outlived their doctor's expectations, for instance. And he realized that his exceptional patients had certain attributes that allowed them to do exceptionally well. And I just want to reflect as well, we interviewed Bernie, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and he is just like a living manifestation of being tapped into spirit. He kind of lives in the veil between the kind of very physical world that you and I kind of perceive in the day-to-day and something that's much bigger than himself. So for instance, he just tells these wild stories. He had a near-death experience when he was 4 years old, when he choked on a toy, and it sounded like his guardian angel was there and kind of gave him the Heimlich maneuver and kind of got him to survive. And he was really like pissed off coming back into his body because it was such a beautiful, wonderful space that he was in, and so on. And then the other wild story that I find is that he did some type of art therapy session, and he drew his own spirit guide named George. And he said one of the times that he gave a lecture, somebody had been drawing and they drew George, not knowing anything about George or Bernie or anything like that. And they said, "This is the guy that was standing beside you throughout your whole talk." And Bernie said the day that he did that, when he was like downloading something, it was just coming right from his heart. Dave, what else? How else would you describe Bernie in terms of like his wild stories that kind of point to the spiritual?
Yeah, Bernie normalized mystical phenomenon and how actually very common they are. He's a living example of a research study that came out that analyzed how commonly do people experience these strange otherworldly events. And they were looking at scientists and engineers, wondering they must be the most skeptical. Big study, thousands of people. What they found was over 90% of both scientists and engineers and the general public and those who are enthusiastic about spirituality, all of them, over 90% have experienced mystical phenomenon in their life. But we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to compartmentalize it. So we kind of shrug it off or put it away. But on reflection, in hindsight, it's pretty interesting stuff, revealing that we're connected to something pretty amazing and wonderful. And we can be curious about that.
Yeah, agreed. There's a lot more than meets the eye. It also reminds me that 1 in 6 people who've had a cardiac arrest also have a near-death experience, right? So, and it's cross-cultural. I think Dave might be getting into that. I don't want to steal your slides now. So Bernie, so what are the attributes? And I'm using the kind of lens of spirituality, or something that's bigger than body and personality. What are the attributes of his remarkable survivors? So his exceptional patients, as he called them, were truly able to accept their situation. So some people had supposedly incurable cancers, and yet they had some sense of deep peace, right? And how can you get to a sense of peace and calm, in the midst of that kind of psychological turmoil? And I would suggest to you that there's some sense of trust, something that's bigger that will, allow you to be safe throughout that entire process, no matter what the outcome is. So the acceptance piece, points to something that's bigger. And yet I would say it's this kind of and both phenomenon, accepting of where you're starting, like for you, each of you personally right now, and being proactive and doing the work and trying to facilitate your healing. So it's an and both phenomenon there. His exceptional patients also saw the cancer diagnosis as an opportunity to learn and also to express their spirit, right? So no matter what the outward circumstances are, we still have this opportunity to love that next person who walks in the door, right? And so they're seeing cancer diagnosis as an opportunity to reprioritize and to live their authentic life, to live their life from that kind of sense of from spirit, I guess is the best way to say that one. And then obviously the last one, I want to just touch on this, willing to self-love, self-care. When we get a cancer diagnosis, we also recognize that life is sacred. So whether you've got 2 years to go or 52 years to go, life is sacred. And so how do we live that life? We love ourselves because that's the foundational bit. And we take care of ourselves because that also helps us to heal and grow and to be our best selves. So again, the higher spiritual principles are being manifested in the day-to-day. So then the next book that really drew me here actually was Alistair Cunningham's, but the next one was Kelly Turner's book on radical remissions. And as you know from this series, Kelly was a PhD scientist who interviewed, I think for a book, like 80 people who had undergone a they had undergone a spontaneous remission, i.e. medical system said, you can't survive this, you've got terminal cancer, and these patients had regressions of their tumor and they actually lived. And so Kelly was very interested. She wanted to know what the common factors or features were. So similar to Bernie's writing. And so she came up with taking control of your health. Only 2 of these, in fact, exercise is the 10th, but anyways, only 2 of these were actually physical. For the most part, it was like tapping into your tuition, the other aspects. Following your intuition is also, to me, related to the idea of an inner guidance that has incredible wisdom and love. And that is starting to, for me, that gets that feeling of a spirituality, right? So something wants you to grow, something wants you to heal, something wants you to connect to that deeper level. So when you're able to listen to that, you get pushed in the direction that's helpful for you. And then there's the emotional work, which we talked about last week. And then lastly, I'm pointing to, having a strong reason for living is this idea of purpose, and then deepening spiritual connection. So again, it's a common factor amongst the radical remission survivors. They're doing the work of deepening their connection. And it's like almost paraphrasing a lot of Kelly's work now. So how did, when she interviewed these people and she kind of coalesced the factors, how did these people actually do this? So first of all, they had a connection between their bodies, their lives, and something that was deeper. And it's, you might use the word God or the universe or higher love, life force energy, chi, prana. So it's describing something that's bigger than themselves, that the loving consciousness might be it. She used the word spiritual energy, and that's, if you don't like that, then just call it life force energy. Secondly, it wasn't that they were doing this as an intellectual process or even kind of just praying at kind of intellectual level. It was actually a lived experience. It was felt within the body, so physical sensation within the body, and an intense emotion. So it's really connecting at heart level as well as our physicality. So it's not just a brain game. And they would describe it as a warm, peaceful energy or a blanket of deep peace and unconditional love, right? So when you have that kind of sense of spiritual experience, that's the kind of feeling that you come home to, that's with us, I would suggest, all the time. And it's not as a result of belief, but a practice. It's like how do you tap into that? How do you get yourself into that space? And when you get into this space, then you experience something physically and emotionally. So that's the first idea around that. There are a lot of different ways. So there's no one right way to kind of facilitate that connection and the deep spiritual feeling. Some people experience that through physicality, right? So they're stretching their bodies, they're slowing down during yoga, or they get a bit of a runner's high maybe that kind of taps them in and slows down their brain, or even a walk in nature. Not only is it the walk, but the kind of connection with something that's big and vast, looking at the stars at night. And then there's the spiritual practices, right? So we can pray, practice the meditation to slow down those thoughts, chant. So there are different ways to kind of ritualize that slowing down and coming home. I've had experience with healing touch or Reiki. It's this idea that our body has energy within it that the Reiki practitioner, even I like this as a kind of self-care. You can actually send loving energy into your body, into yourself. And again, I like that because it points to something that's bigger, something that's bigger than the Western science perspective. Imagery or visualization is also a mechanism to tap into that bigger perspective. But the idea is that we need to practice, just like, lifting weights. If you do a little bit each day and a little bit more each day, you get stronger and stronger and stronger as the weeks and months go by. In the same way, we can practice a spiritual practice such that we begin to resonate more and more. We deepen our connection with the spirit, or spiritual energy. Kelly talks about this idea that, different types of love for self, love for, others, but there's something that's bigger than that, which we would call unconditional or universal love, which is really at the source, as Dave will soon to teach us, is consciousness, is love, is that biggest energy. That's what we're part of. When we feel that, when we get into those states, we lose the sense of separateness. Right? We feel like we're part of everything, especially during peak experiences. It was like Yvonne Kaysen came on and gave the podcast. She was like, after having these spiritual experiences, she was like in love with the squirrels. She just loved with the trees. She's just in that space of just loving everything. And it's a feeling, again, that happens during practice. You get the sense that there's no particular source, and it's available. It's available with us all the time if we slow down to actually tap into it. So the most profound spiritual experiences often allow us that kind of full unity of consciousness, full unity of the universal love. Okay, Callie talks about this idea that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So we look then, if that's the case, if we're actually spiritual beings as well as physical beings, then healing can occur at the kind of physical level, and we heal at that level that can have profound influences on the body. Takeaway for all of us: we need to do the work. It's that simple. The little bit of kind of daily practice puts us in that state of mind and can make a profound influence on all of our life, how we treat our body, how we connect with others within the relationships, how we look at the world. So it's the other one she said is like, she said, quote, stopping the mind, as if you could actually practice a meditation technique and not have thoughts come through. I would say maybe slowing down the mind, or better is just like not paying so much attention to our thoughts, not listening to our thoughts so closely. So the chattering mind's going to happen, but we don't have to kind of buy into all the chattering. So that allows us to deepen our connection with spirit. And then we're suggesting, therefore, if you practice meditation where you practice that skill of attention and coming back home to the here and now, that allows us to resonate more and more with this spiritual aspect of ourselves. Just a quick one around Kelly's action steps then. So she talked about a deep breathing technique, which I would say, produces a relaxation response and again allows you to resonate. She recommended walking outside, but not just like walking and thinking about what you need to do. It's like walking and paying attention, being mindful and grateful and connected with what's out there, especially like the sky and the trees and the stars and all that stuff. There are different techniques, guided imagery and meditation. You can practice daily prayer. If you don't know how to pray, then pray how to pray. And then she also suggested that we can facilitate our spiritual growth in group. So it's almost as if these practices, these techniques are more powerful if we do them with other people. And obviously during COVID, that ain't happening. But the group that you're looking for is one that actually has a practice where they're actually doing a technique, right? So you're doing a meditation or doing a chant or whatever it is, as opposed to just kind of either a conversation or kind of teaching. You actually want to be practicing together as a group. Okay, so that finishes Kelly's teaching. Thanks, Kelly, for that wonderful chapter from your book. We also interviewed Jeffrey Rutledger recently. So he's the Harvard-based psychiatrist who also has a Master's of Divinity in Princeton Seminary College. And he began interviewing people who had undergone spontaneous remissions from lots of different diseases, including, super advanced cancer. And he called it spontaneous healing. And again, was looking at the attributes or the activities of the people who did exceptionally well. So very much like Kelly's book. And he had the 4 pillars of health. And I'm just going to briefly touch on this idea of healing your identity as as one of the pillars before we hand over to Dave's great teaching. And in his book, he basically talks about healing your identity. And the idea is that if you have a false impression of who you are, like I'm the one who always takes care of others, or, I'm not worth it, or, some of these kind of core beliefs that are restricting in terms of how you identify yourself, if you can heal those and let go of those kind of blocks to your beauty and your wonderful character, your wonderful spirit, if you let go of the blocks, then you can actually facilitate deep healing. It's like releasing the healing potential within the body. I would say, and we actually interviewed him, and he never, he's just such an amazing, lovely, extremely wise character, but he would never define the kind of, like the real kind of spirituality, because it's so individual. I would suggest that we do have an identity that transcends our physical, emotional, thought, personality system. And that's when we can kind of claim that, integrate that, become whole with that, that also is healing in itself. And we tap into a much greater loving energy. So that's, for me, the healing of your identity part of it. The good Reverend. Oops, are you mute?
Thanks, Rob. There's so much information in there to absorb, but I don't want anyone to stress about it, to relax into this and realize or trust that you're already a spiritual being. All this wisdom is already wired into you. It's what you are. So it's a matter of uncovering. I want to acknowledge that many or all of you are facing cancer. You're facing advanced, possibly advanced disease. You're taking treatments to fight for more moments of life. So I wanted to share a few images to explore that. The whole medical system, the whole model of care is to push death away, right? This is on an Atlanta hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, and it represents that paradigm. We're going to treat the body, we're going to cure the disease, we're going to defy death. And the technology used to do this is truly astounding. However, death is going to happen eventually. It's a 100% statistic. And to see death as an enemy is right there one of the aberrations in spiritual perspective. Death is not the enemy. I know you don't want to leave this world and you don't want to die, but eventually we're all going to. A vibrant and healthy spirituality actually makes friends with death, comes to a place of equanimity and even curiosity about what it is. A vibrant, healthy spirituality does not defy death or squash it down, but moves towards it, embedded in a confidence that death is actually it's a doorway, right? Death is a comma, not a period at the end of your life. Now, you don't need to be religious in order to experience that. However, most religions do reinforce that rescue, that sense of rescue from an external God, just as that medical model defies death. I find that a lot of very religious people want to defy death. And so they feel if they just pray hard enough, right, God will provide a miracle. Or if they just take, a treatment that will only give them a 1% or a 10% chance of surviving, they say commonly, well, because of my kids, because of my family, I have to take that chance. Maybe I'm in the 1%. You see beneath that is great fear, but no little realization that death is not the problem. Dying is not the problem. Leaving is the problem. And in that statement to grasp for more treatment, for more hope, for more of life to continue, beneath that is an unfinished love story. That's why we take treatment. We want the love stories to go on. And so we pray to an external God, intervene, fix me, right? So we reach out to a mystery and a hope that is nebulous and ephemeral because we're scared, because we don't want to go. That is profoundly beautiful because it speaks of the goodness of your heart, the health of your relationships, the value of those in your lives. And that's very noble. We are who we are through our relationships. And this is the only love we've known. This is the only life we can recall. What lies on the other side? Well, it's either oblivion or transformation, but either way, it can be a rough road. A vibrant intrinsic spirituality, not an external God, but an inner sense of you emanate and are part of this mystery, this wider dimension of what is it, right? That usually results in an acceptance of mortality and an ability to take the steps, reasonable steps for life to continue. And it's marked not by a sense of rescue and the miracle, but an awareness that you are a miracle, that your death is a transformation, right? And that the focus is not on desperation or driven by fear. The focus is on deep presence in the here and now. It is on manifesting love. It is on doing what you can so that your life continues, caring for your loved ones, but also being open to all that is and all that might be. You can hold life and death in your heart at the same time. That's a sign of profound spiritual awareness. That's okay. So it doesn't need to be binary. This is difficult stuff, right? Because the instinct, when we have cancer, our instinct is protect our family from that conversation. Don't look like we're giving up hope. Don't give in to that. Don't give it energy, right? Even though with an advanced disease or progressive metastatic cancer, that's a real possibility. So you entertain it. It's a secret world that you negotiate with. You negotiate with mortality from the beginning, from diagnosis, but you protect your family from it. Well, guess what? Families negotiating with mortality too, and they're quite aware. This is that word, cancer. You could die, but they don't want to say it out loud, lest it appear they're giving up hope. Remarkable survivors have a spirituality that gives them the clarity and the vocabulary to engage in those difficult conversations, right? To say, well, this is an aggressive cancer, or this is an advanced cancer. I could die. I want to do everything reasonable to live. Let's talk about it. And then stumble through the conversations, right, that follow. An early, little plug here, a little early advertisement. To help you with that, please check out advancedcareplanning.ca. And that'll give you a hand on this. An intrinsic spirituality is one in which you can move into your vulnerability and your brokenness, your fears, your unfinished love stories, and you can simply be with it. No need to fix, no need to reassemble, be with it with equanimity. This is a sculpture by Paige Bradley, who was so proud of this work, and when she finished it, it was an intact sculpture representing that piece, just of a woman meditating. And none of the museums would show it. They weren't interested, none of the art galleries. And she decided, well, it's no good, so she shattered it. And her heart broke, and she wanted to repair it. And she called in an associate, and together they did this. This is what it ended up being. And it profoundly represents a vibrant, deep, healthy spirituality in the midst of suffering and brokenness. You know, the Leonard Cohen song, "Ring the bells that still can ring, bring your secret offering, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in." I think he was wrong, that's how the light gets out, right? The intrinsic sense of the divine means this mystery, this sacredness is within you, and it shines out through your authenticity and your vulnerability. If it's shining in, that's an extrinsic spirituality, where we are rescued by a God who, you know, is some old guy in heaven, or that ancient model of the gods around us. All spiritual traditions speak of the divine in their own culture and their own language, but the bottom line of all of them is that the divine, that realm of spirit, is a realm of profound love. Now, I don't speak of love here as an emotion. I speak of love as the highest level of consciousness. In the Christian tradition, God is love. That is echoed throughout the scriptures, especially as you move into the New Testament and into the later letters. St. Paul writing, or John, one of his short letters, says, "God is love, and those who love live in God, and God lives in them. Those who do not love do not know God, or the divine, or the sacred." So all healthy spiritual traditions explore this manifestation of love in its many forms. And that is entwined with justice, but it is also entwined with you being a manifestation of that. And the goal is for your authenticity, congruency, and integration. A side effect of this is being a good person. But more than that, being love itself. So that's pretty big, that's pretty cool. Don't let it intimidate you. In fact, I think in my own Christian tradition, I'm a Lutheran pastor, I think of how the shocking truth that Jesus never said, "Worship me." He said, "Follow me, walk in the ways of love." And it's not believing in the Christ that matters, it's becoming him. No pressure. But to have a vibrant spirituality in which you are centered in love, that is the wisest way you could ever go. So, and as a Christian pastor, but also as an interfaith chaplain, I want to encourage you. You don't need to believe in the divine. You don't need to believe in God or the afterlife to do this. Your spirituality is determined far less by the content of your belief as it is by the quality of your love. So if you focus on your love, how do I love myself? How do I love others? How do I become love? You will be animating this astonishing, mysterious life force. You will be spiritually a very healthy person. So I want to explore that with remarkable survivors and the challenge before us to do it. Most of us, I think all of us, operate from our ego identity. That's what lies above the surface, right? But beneath the surface is the bulk of who and what we are. Yikes, it's the subconscious. It's all those unseen factors of fear and hopes and dreams and memories, injuries, woundedness. How have you broken others and how have you been broken, right? All of this material dwells in the subconscious that you have not been able to integrate, right? And integration is healing. You've not been able to integrate all this into your main identity, your overt identity. So spiritual practice is something that unearths all that is hidden within you. So here's some encouragement. Amidst that bulk beneath the surface of the water, accompanying your pain and the drives which that self-sabotage you, the parts of your personality which are driven by anxiety or unhealthy desire, or all of those aspects, the shadow aspects of who and what we are, all of that is accompanied by your divine self. In fact, I would say, while the subconscious, that which lies below the water, contains stuff that is to be integrated, the spiritual realm, which is the water itself, right, is there for your resources, for your growth. So we are immersed in it, and remember, ice is frozen water. So we are that, we are it, and yet we think we're not. So that's pretty exciting. Be curious about who you are. If you want a little tool to do this, ask someone you trust to tell you something about you that you don't know. Right? Can you tell me something about myself that I'm blind to? It's a courageous thing to do, but it'll give you insight into what's in the subconscious. Or sit in meditation, just sit quietly and listen for the crazy cacophony of thoughts and feelings within you. Better still, I invite you as a spiritual practice to sit with someone you trust and gaze into their eyes for 3 minutes and say nothing. You're going to use them as an amplifier to crank up the volume on your own noise. So listen for the thoughts and feelings that go into overdrive and be curious about them. Don't try to fix them or edit them. Just be curious about them. When you get angry, right? When you get frustrated, when you get scared, stay with the emotion in your body. Listen to it, be curious about it, be compassionate with it. In doing that, you will be the divine love right there. You're not suppressing any aspect of your life, which may be very hard at that time, but you are opening to it and you're working with the energy of it. My goodness, all this has so much energy. Let's not waste the energy. Don't waste the crisis. Go into it with curiosity and ask yourself, gee, I'm terrified. My stomach, my gut is making flip-flops. I can't breathe deep. My heart is just racing. I wonder what that's about. Even that curiosity will bring you back to yourself, right? So this is a model, a psychological model that helped you investigate all of that. Quadrant 1 is what I know about myself and you know about me. And as I get to know you, I let you know what is in quadrant 2, what is hidden to you but known to me. Develop friendship, reveal more information. But there's always stuff people observe and know about ourselves that we can't see. That's the blind stuff. So ask them to let you in and help enlighten and break down that barrier. And then in the unknown, right, that's the shadow side, but it's also infinite because all of this flows from a higher, different realm. Unless you have a sense of meaning, unless you have a sense of purpose within a crisis, unless your identity has some shape of significance in this world, you will have what's called an existential vacuum. So I put a vacuum cleaner on a person contemplating their existential life, right? Who am I? What do I matter? I have cancer now. Everything's going to fade away. What's the point? Will anyone remember me? What am I here for? Good questions. You're wrestling with mortality. You're negotiating with your ultimate demise, which might turn out to be, I'm confident, something quite surprising. ironically, it is within suffering that we can accelerate our spiritual growth, because it forces us to ask the questions, it pushes us into overdrive, to reflect upon our life and our significance. Now, I speak of this because I've had cancer 4 times. I've had a lot of time to think about, do I matter? What's the significance of this? If there's a spiritual lesson in this, I must be pretty thick-headed. I'm not getting it because the cancer keeps coming back. I'm 18 years remission now. I think I learned my lesson. But how can I use the crisis to not only go through cancer, but to grow through cancer? Let's use it as fuel for your journey. Good spiritual activation. Ultimately, the big question, and this goes to the heart of spirituality, the big question is not, is there a God? Or which religion is true? My goodness, throw all that out. It is grossly inadequate and reveals the poverty of our words and the poverty of our perception. We need to grow into better questions. And ultimately, in science and medicine, as well as philosophy and existential wrestling, the ultimate question is not, is there a God, but what is consciousness? What is this animating thing that enables you to listen to me and look at these pretty pictures, right? What is it that is thinking these thoughts? It is the ultimate mystery, and we fundamentally don't know what it is. It can't be measured. It is the golden nugget at the core of all exploration. So what is consciousness? I had a near-death experience, so I've gained a little bit of insight on this. And what I can assure you of is whatever consciousness is, it sure doesn't end when the body does. I was 27 years old. I was doing a service in a hospital chapel, a church service. I was dealing with my second tumor, which is paranganglioma. So my tumor doesn't spread out and metastasize like many of yours or blood conditions. It sits as a encapsulated tumor, but it is a time bomb filled with norepinephrine and dopamine and catecholamines. And these are released when my adrenal gland activates for any reason: joy, fear, anxiety, exercise. And I was a student minister, so I would, every time I got into the pulpit, public speaking is an anxiety-provoking thing. Every time I got in the pulpit, I took my life in my hands. But I was stubborn and stupid, and I kept on doing it. And the adrenal gland turns on, it causes the tumor to explode. So you die very quickly, 1 or 2 minutes, because your blood pressure goes to 500 over 300, and all this adrenaline, massive doses, and you just turn off. Well, I was in this hospital chapel doing a service, and wouldn't you know, of course, the tumor activates, and I felt the initial stages of it, cramps in the stomach, sweating, and I was like, I can do it, I can do it. Pull yourself together. Boom, I was gone. Before I hit the floor, I was suddenly in another dimension, and this is what I saw. Doesn't look really like heaven, does it? I saw a grassy hill. I was standing on this hill, and there was a tree at the top of the hill. I desperately wanted to run to that tree, but more importantly, I experienced myself suddenly whole and complete. I'd moved into a state of absolute congruency, authenticity, integration, and connected to everything, which is why people who have a near-death experience, which is, as Rob said, 1 in 6 who have a cardiac episode, 1 in 10 who have a brush with death, we all describe it as home, because suddenly you are not suppressing any part of who and what you are complete, you are whole, which is the meaning of the word salvation. That doesn't mean life after death, it means to be whole and complete. So I was there, whatever there was, I was in a body kind of like this one, I was walking, I was overjoyed, and I was accompanied by an entity that was not human. And we had a simple conversation, which he basically said, it's great to see you, David. Things are going well. You got a lot of work to do. You can't stay here. You got to go back. See you later. Coming back is the hardest aspect of this mystical ultimate transformation, because you are suddenly compressed into a gelatinous blob of flesh, and your words are reduced to be meager in reflection of truth. Your thoughts are linear and grossly inadequate, and gravity pulls upon you, and movement is incremental compared to the state of freedom and expanded consciousness that you have in these states. I realize now, I'm 56, I'm doing the work they sent me back to do. In my own bumbling way, but I'm very confident that I will continue when my body does not. And I recognize, it led me down the rabbit hole to research this phenomenon. This is universal. Doesn't matter what you believe, atheists and the great devout ancients and modern people, children and adults, all faith traditions and none, this is universal. If consciousness continues, then it must be universal. Tapping into your spirituality is a matter of awakening and being curious that you are more than your body and more than meets the eye. Now, this, for me, was the ultimate lesson in spirituality and got me so excited, and it came from cosmology. This is a photograph I took in New Zealand when Dr. Rutledge and I were with Gabriella, and we were touring, doing a wonderful trip through New Zealand, doing some talks. So I took this photograph at Lake Tepico, I can't remember the name, but gorgeous. And here is a little church, the Church of the Good Shepherd, and the night sky above. Cosmologists, astronomers, scientists are now teaching and telling us that what we see, what we take for real, this physical reality, all these visible atoms makes up 0.004% of the universe. 4% of the universe is all of the matter, all of the atoms. Well, what is the universe? 26% of the universe is something called dark matter, which has been observed by its effect upon the pull of galactic clusters and mathematical factors around the nature of gravity and mass. And then 69% of the universe is something called dark energy, which is another word for voodoo witchcraft. We don't know what the heck that stuff is, but it works in the mathematical formulas. So here we are, modern people on a tiny blue dot, putting all of our chips on 0.004%. Not a good bet. Spirituality is opening to that other mystery, that you are more than meets the eye, and you emanate from something absolutely astonishing. So I like to say that God is the underlying consciousness from which reality emanates and is sustained. Back to that mystery of consciousness. In fact, you can throw out the word God if that has injured you, and you can throw out the word Jesus and Christ if that has injured you. Throw it out and replace it simply with the word love as the highest state of consciousness. Live that, be that. Oh my goodness, that's the quality of remarkable survivors. But I want to point out, they don't do it overtly. They often don't do it intentionally. They don't know that they're doing it. It's a natural flow of compassion, curiosity, openness, sense of connection to something greater. Okay, so do it, but don't put a lot of work into it. It's more like laughter and play. It's more like dance, right? You give yourself intuitively to this, the gift of life and the gift of who you are to life. Those are qualities of remarkable survivors. We tend to think, again, if we believe in a spirit, that there's this spirit world and then there's the physical world, and they're somehow distinct, and that one is higher than the other. Wrong. That's a dualistic perspective. Think of it in this way. Spirit doesn't arise from matter, right? Matter doesn't Life doesn't emanate from that, and then mind, spirit, soul, spirit. Matter is the densest form of spirit, right? Physical universe is the densest manifestation of dark energy or whatever that is. So you are that. That's pretty cool. And we are all on what's called, I call the identity experiment. When you come into this world, you have no distinction between you and the environment. You're a blank slate, and all is one. And then written upon that slate is the story of consciousness, ego identity, and the experiment of the universe manifesting through you. So there's a consciousness contracts. All happens in the first year of life, and you realize very quickly there's living and non-living in your environment. So that's a beginning of a formation of the ego identity of who you say is me. And then the second contraction, very quickly, you realize there's mind and body. I am in this thing, right? And that's forming identity. And then personality and deeper aspects of ego identity form as you receive messages and experiences from the environment that you're able to integrate into the ego, or you're not able to integrate, and they go into the subconscious. And that builds, all right, that builds. It's our emotional, spiritual homework to reintegrate all that stuff. What accelerates that homework? Suffering, a crisis. It makes you examine your priorities. It triggers your ego defense mechanisms for self-preservation. You want to stay safe, but you can't stay safe if you're going to explore the spiritual realm. You've got to go into the unknown land, the wilderness. So forgiving yourself, forgiving the broken parts, integrating them, entering periods of occasional despair, especially if you're physically suffering, if you have advanced cancer, you know this stuff, because now your world is shrinking instead of expanding. You're not able to work, your role in the family changes, you're eventually not able to get out of the bed, right? The world is, an identity is shrinking. Ego identity doesn't like it, pushes back against it with defense mechanisms, but it is a process through which spirit is revealed. And when a person does this hard soul homework with curiosity, compassion, sense of purpose, those are big aspects of spirituality, there can be a perplexing peace, a sense of knowing, and an openness to mystery, and connection to purpose. And then at the end of life, for those who have that sense of openness, in fact, I would say for the majority of people as they die, and I have been with hundreds of people as they have died, the majority who are conscious or semi-conscious experience an expansion of consciousness and even peace and ecstasy at the very end, as long as pain is well controlled. This is the universal human journey of awakening and expansion back into that which emanates and sustains us. And in the Christian tradition, St. Paul says, God is that through which we live and move and have our being. Pretty cool. But again, throw out the word God if it doesn't work for you. Love is that through which we live and move. The consciousness, right? The mystery. You are more than meets the eye. You are more than 0.004%. What's cancer got against that? Here, get to Jeff Redinger's sense of your very foundation of identity, the ground of being shifts, and you are different. I encourage you to, if many of us are, if not from a Christian tradition, we are embedded in a pretty strong Christian culture. It's much more multifaceted and multi-faith. But I want to say something really shocking here. Western Christianity is so off the rails from what it originally was to be. We are unaware of, from a doctrinal sense, how much heretical, ridiculous, aberrant content is being preached and practiced. I'm still learning about how weird my own faith tradition has become compared to what it is. I encourage you to go on YouTube and look at this guy, Franciscan monk, a priest, Father Richard Rohr, and just YouTube Richard Rohr on the universal Christ. He speaks plainly and bluntly, it's an hour long, and beautifully, and with humor, eloquence, insight, and rigorous academic awareness of the aberrations within the Christian faith tradition and how it needs to return to its source, which was a universal spirituality, very much embedded in the mystery of consciousness, and no walls on it, no borders, no copyright on the divine, and the distinction, quite surprising, of how Jesus, an historical entity, and Christ, the universal mystery of everything, are different, right? One is particular, one is absolute universal potential. I can't explain it any more than he does. If you need to repair your faith, have a look at that. Or look at my book, which is pretty good. This won the Nautilus Book Award, which is given to books that help shift and repair the consciousness of the planet. I was more than flattered, I was shocked. People who received this award include the Dalai Lama and Pope Francis and Naomi Reming, and ridiculous to think I would be in their company, frankly. But the book seems to be good, and it's raised thousands of dollars for cancer patients, and it weaves my 4 journeys with cancer and patient stories of cancer with insights on how to use your spirituality, use cancer to activate your spirituality and grow into love itself. And davidmaginley.com, you can go there and explore interviews and resources, and it'll take you to Amazon, where you can buy the book, audio and paperback and ebook. So I got to plug that, have an advertisement at the end. Whatever your beliefs, focus on your love as you engage with serious or advanced cancer, or any cancer, any crisis, as you engage with the kids, right? And the homework that is triggered through family dynamics, that's revealing that subconscious stuff that asking for integration. Be love in your own bumbling way, as I do, and you'll be doing the wisest thing. So I'm going to pause there and really thank you for joining us to explore this rather huge topic.
That's absolutely wonderful, Dave. Maybe just one more point as we wrap up the kind of recorded part of this. One of the byproducts of people going through a near-death experience is they completely lose their fear of dying, fear of death. I guess fear of death, I would say. And interestingly, there were some recent studies whereby they give mushrooms or psilocybin acid to people who have advanced cancer. And it's through it's a therapeutic environment. It's about 6 or 8 hours. It's very well structured and very safe. And again, about 80% of people who have this experience come back and have no fear of dying after.
Yeah, I echo that. I am not in any way afraid of death. In fact, like all near-death experiencers, I am homesick for what I saw. Dying is another issue. I have some concerns about that. I hope it goes smoothly. So I filled out my advance directive. I've made my wishes known, right? We don't know how we're going to exit this world sometimes. So make sure the journey is smooth. We want to reduce turbulence on takeoff. And everyone I'm with, as they die, I quietly say to them, say hi from me, and we'll see you on the other side.
Beautiful finish. Layla, are there questions that we should address? And we will get to, someone's raised their hand, we'll get to that one as well, either before or after we turn off the recording.
So it doesn't look like we have any typed questions, so I'm guessing people want to ask their questions directly. So I'm okay if we just move directly onto that portion. If anybody has to leave now, I realize we're just a little bit past 1 o'clock. I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us for our webinar today. really hope that you got something out of it in terms of your own spiritual practices and being able to cope with everything going on in your life. We have one more webinar in this series. Our last one is next week. So December 16th at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday again. So really looking forward to seeing everybody again for our last session. Hopefully you can stick around for some questions now, but if not, take care.
Thank you. Thanks to the Canadian Cancer Survivors Network for doing all of this. Take care, guys. Have a great week. 1 week away.